Hello there! Since I'm stuck with putting out the first episode of this series, I'm also burdened with scripting the explanation of it. So this is our first series on the channel, and it's going to be a series of guides on how to play the different champions of League of Legends in an incredibly serious and well thought out fashion. What's going to make it special is, rather than me doing all of the work, we're leaving each guide up to whoever plays that champion most. So for example, I'm doing this one, Jordan is doing Ahri, Charlie is doing Akali, and so on. So part of the fun, every time a new one of these comes out, is going to just be, okay, who the fuck's done this video? Now that that's out of the way, please enjoy the rest of the video, and I'm sure we'll see you soon. Hello and welcome to a definitive guide to playing Aatrox. What would a good subtitle for Aatrox? The generic angry guy. I'm going to be completely honest, I don't enjoy playing this champion or talking about this champion anymore. If you had spoken to me about 2 years ago when his rework first came out, when did Aatrox's rework come out? 2018. 4 years ago now. So if you had asked me 4 years ago my thoughts on this champion, they would have been very positive and overwhelming. If you had asked me 5 years ago what my thoughts on this champion were, they would have been very positive and overwhelming. If you had asked me 6 years ago, probably not. At least my aggression towards his character matches his personality. I literally only agreed to do this one so I could get to do Akshan quicker. So in terms of lore, Aatrox is actually really fucking cool. There's a reason why he's titled the World Ender, because the fucker has literally killed a god before. Essentially, the Darkin were corrupted Shreem and Ascended that got a bit too into blood magic, which is nifty. And so the Targonians decided you should probably stop that, and so the aspect of Twilight, which is just fucking Zoe, decided to trick the Darkin into becoming trapped inside their weapons. So now Aatrox is not this guy, he's the sword. Anyone who picks up the sword becomes this guy. So Aatrox, after thousands of years of being trapped inside his blade, kind of went a bit nutso and now just wants to kill everyone because he assumes that if there is no one to pick up his sword, he can die. So he just wants to kill himself, just like me when I play this fucking champion. In terms of runes, you want to go Conqueror because it's the only thing that's fucking viable on him. Although this season, being season 12, there are people who are taking Glacial Augment, which is interesting. I haven't had it work for me yet, but that's because I'm bad at the game. In terms of core items, for like a core 3 items, I would say Gore Drinker is incredibly important. Sterax is really important as well, so you can actually stay alive in a team fight, and then either a Black Cleaver or a Spirit Visage, the increase in healing, because Aatrox's whole thing is his healing, despite the fact he's really fucking bad at it. He's a top laner. I forgot to mention that. Aatrox's passive is the Hackney Special.
Are you stupid?
Every few seconds or so, he gets bonus range on his next auto attack, where he will stab you with his sword, weirdly enough. It heals him a little bit based on the target's maximum health, and the cooldown is lowered every time you auto attack a champion or a large monster. Although if you land sweet spots at the end of his Qs, which I'll go over next, it doubles the cooldown reduction. There's nothing massively wrong with this passive. It's useful. It has its uses. It could use probably like a tiny... the healing's okay on it. The only downside of it is it used to apply Grievous Wounds, or at least Aatrox's own version of Grievous Wounds called Mutilation, which we don't have anymore. But other than that, his passive is still in an okay spot. Like, I don't really feel like it has anything amazing, but nothing really terrible going for it either. Aatrox's Q... It's just Revan's Q, but worse. So Aatrox's Q comes in 3 parts. It has the long bit, the fat bit, and the short bit. In all 3 of these, there is a darker area at the end, or in the third cast part, the middle, where the area will knock them up rather than just damage them. Each part of the Q does more damage than the previous part of the Q, dealing up to, I think it's like 150% of your bonus AD. Aatrox's Q is another indication of it's a fine ability. It is incredibly similar to Riven's, but it's worse because Aatrox is entirely stationary during the casting of it. And while, yeah, he gets a knock up on all 3 parts, the knock up on all 3 parts is a very specific area that you can't really do any repositioning to ensure that you land. And so it makes it quite easy easy to avoid. The hardest part of his Q to avoid is the second, and that's only if you're just in range, because it's shorter than the first cast. Aatrox's W is very clearly a Mortal Kombat reference.
Get over here!
Aatrox fires a skill shot line that goes out in front of him. It will impact an enemy and slow them for a few seconds. If the enemies do not leave the gigantic wedge-shaped area within 1.5 seconds, it drags them back to the center. This ability is good because it means that enemies are forced to stay in Aatrox's range, which is good because it prevents like immobile ADCs. Let's say, for example, Ashe or Misfortune. It means that they have a tough time getting away from Aatrox without flash because they have to try and escape the area. The downside of this ability is the slow has been nerfed to shit quite a few times, and because it's so essential to Max's E second instead of his W, it means that you never really get to a state where the W feels like it's doing much and the enemies can just walk out of it because the slow is so fucking miniature. Aatrox's E is a piss baby little dash. It has a passive and an active component, both of which are irrelevant. Passively, Aatrox heals a bit more. That's it. That's literally it. He just receives a little bit more healing from sources. Well, not even sources, just self-healing. Like, it's not like a Soraka can heal him for more. He just heals more himself, and that's about it. Build one anti-heal item, and you've completely just eradicated his E. Actively, it is the tiniest fucking... I'm fairly certain it is actually the smallest dash in the game. I mean, at least it's not Viego's W where it can't go over walls, because it can go over walls, but it's still fucking miniature. Aatrox's E can also be cast during the cast of his Q, so it means that if you think you might miss it, you can use your E to reposition. Well, his E is good and it plays into his style of being big healy fighty man. It doesn't have 2 casts anymore. It used to have 2 casts at the beginning when he was reworked, and it made things a lot easier. I think I might have a clip of in my game with Fiora where I spoke about why this might be a problem. Because he's lost his Bloodwell and his second E, it means that he's lost any safety for how his kit functions. So like his Qs being incredibly slow wasn't a problem before because you could reposition with them with his E. Now you only get to reposition with your E once every full string. Like for example, if you're a W'd one of my Qs, and I had 2 charges of my E, my reaction could be, okay, I'm gonna E it so it doesn't land the knockup portion. But I can't do that because I've already E'd to hit it with the first part. One of Aatrox's main damaging combos is to throw out your first Q, and if you, by some ungodly reason, manage to land the first knock-up on that without using your E, you throw out your W to slow them. While they're in your W, you hit them with the second part of your Q, potentially using your E. That's useful. Because they got knocked up in the by the second portion of your Q, they then get dragged back into the middle by your W, and you hit them with the third part of your Q, and then you're empowered auto attack. It's a good way to do a decent amount of damage, but it's also unreliable as fuck because you only have 1 charge of your E, and if you miss the first part of your Q, you're kind of fucked. Aatrox's ult is real shit. Aatrox's ult lasts 30 seconds and gives you bonus movement speed, bonus AD and healing, and getting a takedown resets the ult timer. It's a good... It's shit. Like, there is no upsides to this thing. The boost in movement speed, while it's useful and all and lets you catch up to people, it also immediately turns off upon taking any kind of fucking damage, it seems sometimes. Or it's just everyone seems to have some way of slowing you all the time. It has more downsides than it does upsides, while the bonus in AD and healing is nice. And yeah, sure, once you get level 2 or level 3 ult, it is noticeable. Like, when you land your passive on an opponent while you have level 3 ult, the bonus in healing is 100% noticeable, trust me. But with losing the Bloodwell, so when he first got reworked, Aatrox had a Bloodwell, which he would fill up by dealing damage in his ult, and then when he died, he'd resurrect himself based on how much he had filled the Bloodwell with that amount of health. He'd be able to move around while resurrecting as well. It was a very important part of his kit. I don't know why they took it away, because Now Aatrox literally has no identity. There is nothing unique about his kit. While I was editing this, I realized I didn't actually fucking explain why I kept going on about the Bloodwell for so long. Basically, the reason why the Bloodwell was so important to Aatrox was because it meant that when you ulted, while you were forced to go in to take advantage of the ult, it meant you had something there to back you up to make sure you got out. Whereas now, because Aatrox no longer has the Bloodwell or that Resurrect, it means that he is forced to go in. And if he dies, he's dead. And it's your own fault, pretty much. It's an ability which is designed to team fight, but doesn't actually reward you for team fighting unless you are guaranteed to win. The most unique ability of his is his W. And even that is fucking barely. In my closing thoughts, I don't really have much to outline other than, yeah, Aatrox is cool. I really like the champion. I really like the design. But please, Riot, can you give me back the original fucking champion you released?